The Wounded Healer. A quietly reflective sleep narration. Even the tenderest places within us may one day become doorways into kindness. Welcome to Quietly Reflective, a quiet place for gentle thoughts, slower breathing, and a little space from the noise of the day. In this video, we are reflecting on an old and deeply human idea, often connected with Carl Jung, the wounded healer. The wounded healer is not someone who has escaped pain. It is not someone who has solved every sorrow, healed every scar, or risen above life untouched. It is someone who has been affected by life, and who, over time, has allowed that experience to become more than suffering. Not quickly, not perfectly, not always easily, but slowly, with care, the wound may become a doorway into patience, a doorway into humility, a doorway into compassion for the hidden struggles of others. This idea matters because so many people today are moving through life behind armour. We stay busy, we stay useful, we say we are fine. We carry things quietly, often while appearing calm, capable, and composed on the outside. And yet, beneath the surface, many of us are holding old disappointments, private griefs, quiet fears, emotional tiredness, or the ache of having had to be strong for too long. This reflection is not here to glorify pain. Suffering is not beautiful simply because we speak about it gently, and no one needs to be broken in order to be kind. But when pain is met honestly, when it is held with gentleness rather than shame, it can soften the hard edges of the self. It can make us slower to judge, more willing to listen, more careful with the invisible burdens other people may be carrying. In daily life, this can change the way we move through the world. We may become less hurried in our advice, less eager to fix what simply needs to be heard, less likely to dismiss someone's silence, tiredness, fear, or sadness as weakness. And perhaps, just as importantly, we may become kinder toward ourselves. We may begin to understand that healing does not mean becoming untouched by life. Sometimes healing means becoming less afraid of what we carry. Sometimes it means laying down the need to perform strength. Sometimes it means allowing the tender places within us to be met with patience rather than criticism. So tonight, or whenever you are listening, there is nothing you need to prove. You do not need to fix the wound. You do not need to explain the wound. You do not need to turn every difficult thing into wisdom before you rest. You are simply invited to listen, to soften, to let these words move gently in the background. And if something in this reflection meets something quiet inside you, let it do so slowly. Thank you for listening. Thank you for spending this time with Quietly Reflective. And for now, let the day loosen its grip. Let the breath become softer. And let this quiet thought rest beside you. Even the tenderest places within us may one day become doorways into kindness. Chapter 1. The Wound That Became a Doorway. There is a quiet kind of wisdom that does not arrive all at once. It does not come marching through the front door with certainty in its voice. It does not announce itself loudly. It does not demand applause or recognition or proof. More often it arrives softly, slowly, almost without being noticed. It comes after something in us has been touched by life, after something we thought was solid has given way, after a season when the old answers no longer work, and the familiar shape of who we thought we were begins to loosen. And perhaps this is why the idea of the wounded healer has lasted for so long. Because somewhere within it, there is something deeply human, something honest, something that many people recognize, even if they would never use those words. The wounded healer is not a perfect person. not a person untouched by sorrow, not a person who has solved every ache inside themselves. The wounded healer is someone who has known what it means to hurt and who has allowed that hurt in time to become more than pain. Not immediately, not cleanly, not without resistance, but slowly, gently, over many quiet inner seasons, the wound becomes a kind of opening, a doorway. And through that doorway, something tender may begin to enter. A little more patience, a little more humility, a little more compassion for the hidden weather inside other people. There is no need to make suffering beautiful. It is not always beautiful. Sometimes it is heavy. Sometimes it is confusing. Sometimes it leaves us tired in ways we do not know how to explain. Pain does not automatically make us wise. But pain that is met honestly, pain that is listened to rather than denied, pain that is held with gentleness rather than shame, can change the way we see. It can soften the sharp corners of judgment. It can make us less certain about the stories we tell ourselves about other people. It can teach us that every life has rooms we cannot see from the outside. And once we understand that, even a little, we may begin to move through the world differently, more slowly, more carefully, with less need to dismiss what we do not understand. There is a phrase often connected with Carl Jung, the idea that only the wounded physician heals. It is a phrase that can sound strange at first, perhaps even severe. But beneath it is not a celebration of pain. It is not saying that someone must be broken in order to be useful, or that suffering is a qualification for kindness. It is pointing towards something quieter. It is suggesting that real human presence often comes from contact with our own depths. That to sit beside another person's sorrow without flinching, we may need to have sat beside our own. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough to recognize the room, enough to know the silence, enough to understand that some things cannot be hurried. There is a difference between knowing about pain and knowing pain from the inside. One can learn the language of comfort. One can learn the correct things to say. One can learn the shape of sympathy. But there is another kind of knowing that does not come from study alone. It comes from the long night, from the unanswered question, from the moment when the mask slips and we find ourselves face to face with something we had tried not to feel. It comes from disappointment, from grief, from shame, from fear, from loneliness, from the quiet ache of pretending to be fine when something inside us is not fine at all. And yet, over time, if we are gentle with ourselves, these places do not have to remain only places of hurt. They may become places of recognition. The wound may begin as a closed place, a place we protect, a place we hide, a place we do not want anyone to touch. But slowly, if it is met with enough care, enough honesty, enough patience, it may become a doorway. Not a doorway back into suffering, a doorway into understanding, a doorway into tenderness, a doorway into a more forgiving way of seeing ourselves and others. Perhaps you know this in your own life. Perhaps you have met someone who did not try too hard to comfort you, and yet their presence was comforting. They did not rush to explain your pain away. They did not cover the silence with bright advice. They did not try to turn your difficulty into a lesson before you were ready. They simply stayed. They listened. They allowed you to be as you were. And something in you knew that they understood. Not because they had the same story, not because they had lived the same life, but because they had been somewhere inwardly familiar. They had known their own version of being lost, their own version of waiting, their own version of carrying something invisible. And because of that, they did not need to be afraid of your sorrow. There is great gentleness in that, to be with someone who is not frightened by the truth of you, to be with someone who does not need you to become cheerful too quickly, to be with someone who does not treat your pain as a problem to be solved before they can feel comfortable. This kind of presence is rare, and it often grows in people who have had to learn, slowly, how to be present with themselves. The wound creates the opening. At first, that may feel like a hard thought, because most of us would not choose the wound. We would not choose the heartbreak, the loss, the failure, the anxiety, the long season of uncertainty. We would not choose the moment when the life we imagined begins to change shape without asking our permission. And yet, life has a way of opening us. Not always gently, not always in ways we understand at the time. Sometimes the opening comes through something we wanted to avoid. Sometimes it comes through the thing we thought would undo us. Sometimes it comes when the old armour becomes too heavy to keep wearing. And there, in that place, we may begin to discover that we are not only the person we pretended to be. We are more than the composed face, more than the capable voice, more than the role we perform for the world. We are also the tender place beneath it, the tired place, the frightened place, the place that still hopes to be held with kindness. For much of life, we may learn to protect this place. We build a surface self, a presentable self, a self that can function, smile, answer messages, go to work, keep promises, stay polite, remain useful. This surface self is not false in a simple way. It may be necessary. It may help us live. It may help us belong. It may help us move through the demands of the day. But it is not the whole of us. And when we begin to believe it is the whole of us, something inside starts to feel lonely. Because the deeper self does not disappear just because it is hidden. It waits, quietly, patiently. Sometimes it whispers through tiredness, sometimes through restlessness, sometimes through a sudden sadness we cannot explain, sometimes through the feeling that we are surrounded by people, yet somehow unseen. And then, perhaps, a wound appears, or an old wound asks to be noticed, and the life we were holding together becomes less easy to hold. At first, this may feel like breaking, but in time it may become a beginning, because the wound asks us to stop living only at the surface. It asks us to come closer, to listen inwardly, to admit, maybe for the first time, that something in us needs care. Not correction, not judgment. Care. And this is where the doorway begins. Not in the dramatic moment, not in the sharpest pain, but in the quiet turning toward ourselves. The moment we stop saying, "This should not be here," and begin, perhaps only faintly, to say, "This is here, and I can meet it gently." There is something profoundly healing in that small shift, to stop abandoning ourselves because we are hurt, to stop treating pain as proof that we have failed, to stop believing that tenderness makes us weak. The wound, when met with kindness, begins to change its meaning. It is no longer only evidence of what happened to us. It becomes a place where we learned to return to ourselves, a place where we learned that we could be frightened and still breathe. We could be uncertain and still continue. We could be tired and still worthy of gentleness. Slowly, this changes how we meet others, because once we have stopped shaming ourselves for being human, it becomes harder to shame other people for being human too. Once we have seen how much can be hidden behind an ordinary face, we become less quick to assume that others are simple. Once we have known how heavy an invisible burden can be, we become more careful with the burdens we cannot see. And this is where the wounded healer begins to emerge, not as a title, not as an identity, not as someone above others, but as a person who has become more available to compassion because they have stopped running from their own tenderness. There is no need to force this. No need to turn pain into wisdom before its time. No need to make meaning out of everything by morning. Some wounds need quiet. Some wounds need rest. Some wounds need years of being treated gently before they can offer anything at all. And that is allowed. There is nothing to prove tonight. You do not have to become wise because you have suffered. You do not have to transform everything that hurt you into something useful. You do not have to be grateful for the wound. You are allowed simply to acknowledge it. To say, softly, somewhere within yourself, yes, this happened. This mattered. This changed me. And then, perhaps, to add, but it is not the whole of me. Because the wound is not the whole story. It may be a doorway, but it is not the entire house. There are other rooms within you, rooms of memory, rooms of laughter, rooms of ordinary courage, rooms of quiet endurance, rooms where hope still sits, even if it has grown very still. The wounded healer does not heal because they are wounded alone. They heal because, somewhere along the way, the wound was met by awareness, by honesty, by tenderness, by the slow decision not to harden completely. That may be one of the bravest things a person can do, not to remain untouched, but to remain reachable, to let life affect you without allowing it to close you forever, to feel sorrow and still leave room for kindness, to know disappointment and still make space for wonder, to carry a scar and still offer a gentle hand. This does not happen all at once. It happens in small, almost invisible ways. In the moment you pause before judging someone else. In the moment you listen instead of fixing. In the moment you recognize pain in another person's eyes and do not look away. In the moment you allow yourself to rest instead of demanding that you be stronger than you are. These are quiet moments, but quiet things can be powerful. Water is quiet as it shapes stone. Roots are quiet as they hold the tree. The dawn is quiet as it returns to the sky. And healing, real healing, is often quiet too. It does not always arrive as a breakthrough. Sometimes it arrives as a softening, a little less fear, a little more breath, a little more space around the old ache. Sometimes healing is simply the moment when the wound no longer feels like a locked room. There is a little light beneath the door, a little air, a sense that what hurt you may not have the final word. And perhaps, one day, without needing to force anything, you notice that the very place you once hid has become the place from which you understand others most deeply. Not because you wanted pain, not because the pain was good, but because you survived it with enough of your heart still open to recognize another heart when it trembles. That is the doorway. Quiet, unadorned, human. And maybe tonight you do not need to walk all the way through it. Maybe tonight it is enough simply to know that it exists, to know that the tender places in you are not useless. They are not shameful. They are not proof that you are less than anyone else. They may be places still becoming, places where the hard ground has been opened, places where, in time, something gentle may grow. So let this thought rest beside you. The wound is not all you are. The pain is not all you carry. The scar is not a sentence. And the doorway does not need to be opened all at once. For now, it is enough to be here, breathing, listening, allowing the body to soften a little, allowing the mind to loosen its grip, allowing the night to hold what you cannot solve. You do not have to explain yourself tonight. You do not have to understand every part of your story. You do not have to turn the wound into wisdom before you sleep. Simply let it be known, quietly and gently, that even the places that have hurt may one day become places of compassion. And even the parts of you that feel most tender may still be doorways. Doorways into patience. Doorways into kindness. Doorways into the deep, quiet knowledge that you are human, and that being human is enough. Chapter 2. Why Pain Softens the Edges of the Self. Pain has a way of changing the shape of us. Not always loudly, not always visibly. Sometimes it changes us in ways no one else would notice at first. A pause before we answer. A softness in the eyes. A slower judgment. A little more room inside us for what cannot be easily explained. And perhaps this is one of the quiet mysteries of being human. That what hurts us may also, in time, make us less hard. Not because pain is good, not because suffering should be praised, not because every difficult thing arrives with a hidden gift waiting neatly inside it. Life is not always so simple. Some pain is just pain. Some loss is just loss. Some disappointments do not become beautiful because we describe them gently. But still, when pain is met honestly, when it is not pushed away too quickly, when it is not buried under busyness or hidden behind a bright face, it can begin to soften the edges of the self. The self in ordinary life can become quite defended. We learn how to move through the world with a certain shape. We learn what is acceptable to show and what must be hidden. We learn which emotions are welcome and which ones make other people uncomfortable. We learn where we are praised, where we are dismissed, where we are expected to be strong, where we are expected to be useful, where we are expected to keep going. And so, little by little, we form an outer layer, a way of being that helps us survive the day. A personality that can answer the question, "How are you?" with, "I'm fine," even when the truth is more complicated. A face that can smile at the right time. A voice that can sound steady. A body that can keep moving, even while some quieter part of us is asking to be heard. This outer layer is not wrong. It may have protected us. It may have carried us through difficult rooms, demanding jobs, fragile relationships, lonely seasons, and ordinary days when there was simply too much to do. But if we live only from that outer layer, something in us becomes rigid. You begin to mistake protection for peace. We begin to believe that being untouched is the same as being strong. You begin to think that control is safety. And then pain arrives, sometimes as grief, sometimes as exhaustion, sometimes as anxiety, sometimes as disappointment, sometimes as a quiet emptiness that settles over life, even when nothing obvious appears to be wrong. Pain interrupts the performance. It reaches through the polished surface and touches the living place beneath. At first, this can feel frightening, because the outer self likes to know what is happening. It likes a plan. It likes an explanation. It likes to stay composed. It likes to remain impressive, capable, certain, prepared. But pain does not always obey the outer self. It does not always arrive politely. It does not always wait until we have time. It does not always come with language. Sometimes it simply enters, and the old certainty begins to tremble. And in that trembling, something important may begin. The hard edges of the self start to loosen. The part of us that once said, "I would never feel that," becomes quieter. The part of us that once said, "Why can't they just get over it?" becomes less certain. The part of us that once believed everyone else's pain should be tidy, reasonable, and easy to manage begins to understand that the human heart does not always heal in straight lines. Pain teaches us complexity. It teaches us that people are not only what they show. It teaches us that behavior often has roots, that silence may be grief, that anger may be fear, that withdrawal may be exhaustion, that overfunctioning may be anxiety wearing a productive face, that laughter may sometimes be a bridge over a very deep place. When we have suffered in some quiet way ourselves, we become less quick to reduce others to a single moment. We remember how much was happening inside us when the world could only see the outside. We remember the days when we seemed fine, but were not. We remember the conversations where we said very little because we did not have the strength to explain. We remember the strange loneliness of carrying something invisible. And this remembering softens us, slowly, gently, without needing to make a performance of it. The softened self is not a weak self. This is important. To soften is not to collapse. To soften is not to become helpless. To soften is not to lose shape, boundaries, or strength. True softness has its own quiet strength. It is the strength of a hand that does not clench unless it needs to. The strength of a voice that does not need to dominate the room. The strength of a person who can listen without rushing to defend themselves. The strength of someone who knows that tenderness and courage are not opposites. They may, in fact, belong together. A softened self can still say no. A softened self can still walk away. A softened self can still protect what matters. But it does so with less cruelty, less sharpness, less need to prove, less need to stand above another person in order to feel safe. Pain, when met with awareness, can teach us that everyone is carrying something. Not everyone shows it. Not everyone names it. Not everyone has language for it. But most people, if you come close enough, are carrying some private tenderness. A regret they revisit. A fear they cannot quite explain. A grief they have learned to manage in public. A younger version of themselves still waiting to be understood. A disappointment they have tucked away because life required them to continue. And once we begin to sense this, even faintly, the world changes. The stranger in the queue becomes less like an obstacle. The difficult colleague becomes less like a villain. The impatient driver becomes, perhaps, a person having a day we cannot see. This does not mean excusing harm. It does not mean pretending that people cannot hurt each other. It does not mean abandoning discernment. But it does mean leaving a little space in our judgment, a little mercy, a little humility, the understanding that we rarely know the whole story. There is a kind of ego that wants life to be simple. It wants categories, good and bad, strong and weak, successful and failing, over it and not over it, healed and unhealed. But the deeper life refuses such neatness. Human beings are layered. We can be healing and still hurt, kind and still afraid, capable and still tired, wise in one place and confused in another. We can have outgrown old patterns and still feel them echo on difficult days. We can forgive and still need distance. We can accept what happened and still feel sadness when memory returns. Pain teaches us this layeredness, and when we understand our own layers, we become more respectful of the layers in others. This is part of how pain softens the edges of the self. It takes the hard outline we once drew around who we thought we were, and it makes the line more porous, more honest, more human. We stop needing to be only one thing. We stop needing to be untouched in order to be worthy. We stop needing to be fully healed before we are allowed to offer kindness. And slowly, there is room. Room for contradiction. Room for tenderness. room for the unfinished parts of us, room for other people to be unfinished too. There is a gentle relief in this, because so much of human life is spent trying to appear complete. We present versions of ourselves that are clean, edited, understandable. We try to speak in polished sentences. We try to make our choices look intentional. We try to hide the uncertainty beneath the surface. But pain has a way of bringing us back to the truth that we are not polished objects. We are living beings, changing, learning, mistaking, beginning again. And there is nothing shameful in that. There is nothing shameful in being affected by life. The old image of strength says that nothing should touch us, that we should be invulnerable, that we should rise above everything, that we should remain cool, distant, controlled. But a deeper kind of strength may be the ability to be touched without becoming destroyed, to be changed without becoming closed, to be hurt without allowing bitterness to take the whole room. This is not easy. It is not automatic. There are wounds that make people harder for a time. There are seasons when the instinct to protect becomes very strong. And sometimes, hardening is the only thing a person knows how to do. We should be gentle about that too. The heart does not always soften immediately. Sometimes it protects first. Sometimes it goes quiet. Sometimes it hides. Sometimes it says, "Not yet." And perhaps that is part of healing as well. Not forcing softness before it is safe, not demanding tenderness from the places still trying to survive. There is no need to rush the heart. There is no need to stand over the wounded parts of ourselves and insist that they become wise, compassionate, or open before they are ready. Pain softens us best when it is given kindness, not pressure, not performance. Kindness. The kind of kindness that sits nearby and says, "I am here." The kind of kindness that does not demand an instant lesson. The kind of kindness that understands that some parts of us have been holding their breath for a long time. And slowly, perhaps, those parts begin to breathe again. A little, then a little more. The edges soften, not because we have been defeated, but because we have stopped fighting ourselves. We no longer need to exile the frightened part, or shame the tired part, or silence the grieving part, or pretend the lonely part does not exist. We begin to welcome ourselves back. And when we welcome ourselves back, we become less afraid of the truth in others. We can hear someone say, "I am struggling," without needing to make them smaller. We can sit with sadness without turning it into failure. We can witness uncertainty without rushing towards false certainty. We can offer presence instead of performance. This is where the wounded healer begins to take shape again. Not as someone who has all the answers, but as someone whose own pain has made them more spacious, more able to sit in the room with what is real, more able to recognize that healing is not always a dramatic transformation. Sometimes healing is a quiet reduction in harshness, a little more mercy towards oneself, a little less judgment towards another, a little more patience with the slow unfolding of things. Perhaps the wound softens us because it shows us that control was never as complete as we imagined. We thought we could plan everything, manage everything, protect ourselves from every possible disappointment, build a life so carefully arranged that nothing could reach us. But life is wider than our plans. It has weather. It has endings. It has unexpected turns. It has quiet losses and strange beginnings. And when the illusion of total control begins to break, there may be grief in that. But there may also be freedom, because we no longer have to pretend to be invulnerable. We no longer have to carry the impossible task of being untouched. We can admit, softly, that life has reached us, that we have been affected, that we have been changed. And still, here we are, still breathing, still listening, still capable of gentleness. There is something deeply comforting in this. To know that being changed by pain does not mean being ruined by it. To know that softness is not the opposite of survival. To know that the places where we are most tender may also be the places where we become most real. The self, softened by pain, becomes less like a wall and more like a doorway, not open to everything, not without boundaries, but open enough for compassion to pass through, open enough for another person's sorrow to be recognized, open enough for our own hidden parts to come home. And maybe tonight, this is enough to hold, not as a task, not as something you must improve, just as a quiet thought resting beside you. The idea that pain may have softened you in ways you have not yet noticed. Perhaps it has made you slower to judge. Perhaps it has made you more careful with your words. Perhaps it has made you more aware of the invisible burdens people carry. Perhaps it has taught you that a calm face does not always mean a calm heart. Perhaps it has made you kinder in the small places, the ordinary places, the places no one sees. And perhaps, even now, there is a part of you becoming softer without needing to announce itself. A part of you learning that it does not have to be armoured all the time. A part of you beginning to understand that tenderness is not a flaw. It is a form of contact, a way of being close to life, a way of recognizing yourself in others, a way of saying quietly, I know something of what it means to hurt, and because I know, I will try to be gentle. That gentleness may not change everything, but it changes something. And sometimes, something is enough. A softer word, a slower breath, a patient silence, a hand that does not pull away, a heart that does not close completely. These are not small things. They are the quiet work of becoming human in a deeper way. So let the edges soften now if they want to. Not by force, not because you must become anything tonight, but simply because the night allows it. The world can wait a little. The old armour can rest beside the bed. The face you show everyone else can loosen. You do not have to hold yourself so tightly. You do not have to be invulnerable. You do not have to be perfectly healed to be worthy of peace. For now, just breathe, gently, slowly. Let the body remember that it does not have to defend against this moment. Let the mind settle into the quiet. Let the heart be as it is. And somewhere within you, perhaps, let there be room for this simple truth. That pain may have touched you. It may have changed you. It may have softened the hard edges you once needed. But it has not made you less. It has not made you unworthy. It has not taken away your capacity for kindness. If anything, in time and with care, it may become part of the deep, quiet tenderness through which you meet the world. Not perfectly, not always, but gently. And for tonight, gently is enough. Chapter 3. The Armour We Learn to Wear. There are many kinds of armour. Not all of them look hard. Some armour is made of silence, some is made of humour, some is made of competence, of busyness, of always being the one who copes. Some armour looks like being agreeable, some looks like being distant, some looks like never needing anyone, some looks like always being useful, always being calm, always being the person who can be relied upon. And often we do not call it armour while we are wearing it. We call it personality. We call it habit. We call it just the way I am. But somewhere beneath it there may be a softer truth. There may be a younger part of us that once learned, quietly and carefully, what was safe to show and what had to be hidden. Perhaps we learned that sadness made people uncomfortable, so we became cheerful. Perhaps we learned that anger caused trouble, so we became reasonable. Perhaps we learned that needing too much made us feel exposed, so we became independent. Perhaps we learned that being impressive brought approval, so we became capable, polished, prepared. Perhaps we learned that mistakes were dangerous, so we became careful, very careful. And slowly, over years, the armour formed. Not because we were foolish, not because we were false, but because some part of us was trying to protect something tender. This is worth remembering gently. The armour was not created by accident. At some point, it may have helped us survive. It may have helped us move through difficult rooms. It may have helped us remain steady when life felt unpredictable. It may have helped us belong. It may have helped us avoid criticism, rejection, disappointment, or shame. The armour may have been intelligent once, necessary once, even kind in its own limited way. It said, "I will help you get through this." And perhaps, for a while, it did. But armour that protects us from pain can also protect us from closeness. Armour that keeps criticism out may also keep tenderness out. Armour that helps us perform strength may make it harder to receive care. Armour that helps us appear untouched may leave the deeper self unseen. And so, over time, what once protected us can begin to isolate us. Not all at once, not dramatically, but quietly. We may find ourselves surrounded by people who know our capable self, but not our tired self. People who know our humour, but not our sadness. People who know our opinions, but not our fear. People who know what we do, but not what we carry. And sometimes, without meaning to, we become lonely behind the very qualities that others admire. The dependable one, the strong one, the clever one, the calm one, the one who always knows what to do, the one who keeps going. There can be a hidden ache in being seen only through the armour that helped us survive. Because the armour is not the whole person. It is only the part of us that learned how to stand in the world. Carl Jung spoke about the persona, the face we present to others. Not in a harsh way, not as though the persona was simply a lie, but as something we develop to move through life. The persona is the social face, the role, the version of ourselves that knows how to answer, how to behave, how to belong. And we all need some version of it. We cannot bring every private feeling into every public moment. We cannot live without any boundary between the inner world and the outer one. But trouble begins when we mistake the face for the whole self. When we forget that there is someone beneath the role. When the mask becomes so familiar that even we cannot feel the skin underneath. There is a sadness in that, a quiet sadness. The sadness of being praised for a version of yourself that is only partly true. The sadness of being needed, but not known. The sadness of performing wellness while something inside you is asking for rest. The sadness of saying, "I'm fine," so often that the words begin to close over the truth. The armour we wear can be very subtle. It may not look defensive at all. It may look successful. It may look polite. It may look efficient. It may look like having everything under control. But inside, the armour can be heavy. It takes effort to hold a self together too tightly. It takes effort to monitor what can be said and what must remain hidden. It takes effort to be endlessly composed. And often, the body knows this before the mind admits it. The shoulders tighten. The breath becomes shallow. The jaw holds what the heart cannot say. The mind stays alert, always scanning, always preparing, always trying to stay ahead of whatever might happen next. And still, the deeper self waits. The self beneath the armour does not disappear. It waits for a moment of safety, a moment of quiet, a moment when the world is not demanding quite so much. Sometimes it waits for years, and then, often through pain or exhaustion or loss or love or some unexpected opening, the armour begins to loosen. At first, this can feel like danger, because we may not know who we are without it. If we are not the strong one, who are we? If we are not the useful one, who are we? If we are not the calm one, the funny one, the organised one, the independent one, the one who copes, then what remains? The answer may not come quickly, and it does not need to. There is no need to tear the armour away, no need to reject the parts of ourselves that protected us, no need to shame the mask. The mask may have helped us breathe in places where breathing was not easy. The armour may have carried us through seasons when we did not have better tools. We can honour that. We can say, softly, "Thank you for protecting me." And then, perhaps, even more softly, "You do not have to protect me in the same way forever." This is a tender part of healing, not the dramatic breaking of old defences, but the careful loosening of them. A little more truth here, a little more softness there, a little more room to say, "I am tired," a little more permission to not know, a little more willingness to be held, even briefly, by the kindness of another. The armour does not always fall away in one great moment. Sometimes it comes off in small pieces, a guarded laugh that becomes real, a silence that finally becomes words, a hand that accepts help, an apology spoken without self-punishment, a boundary set without cruelty, a tear allowed to arrive without being wiped away too quickly. These are quiet openings, small doorways, gentle returns. And every time the armour loosens, the deeper self has a little more space to breathe. The deeper self may be shy at first. It may not trust the open air. It may not believe that it is safe to be seen. That is understandable. If a part of us has been hidden for a long time, it will not always step forward just because we invite it once. It may need patience. It may need repetition. It may need to be met without pressure. And so we do not force it. We simply make the inner room a little kinder. We stop speaking to ourselves as though tenderness were a weakness. We stop demanding that every feeling justify its existence. We stop treating vulnerability as a failure of discipline. We begin, instead, to listen, quietly, gently, without needing to solve everything tonight. There is a kind of person who has worn armour for so long that rest itself feels unfamiliar. They may sit down and immediately think of what still needs to be done. They may hear silence and feel discomfort. They may receive kindness and not know where to place it. They may be loved and still feel the urge to earn it. If this is familiar, there is nothing wrong with you. It may simply mean that some part of you learned long ago that safety came through effort, through achievement, through usefulness, through being no trouble, through staying one step ahead of disappointment. And that part of you may need time to learn another way, a gentler way, a way where you are allowed to exist without performing, allowed to rest without explaining, allowed to be cared for without immediately repaying it, allowed to be human without turning it into a problem. This, too, belongs to the wounded healer. Because the person who has begun to understand their own armour becomes less fooled by the armour of others. They can sense, sometimes, when someone's sharpness is a shield, when someone's humour is covering grief, when someone's control is covering fear, when someone's silence is not emptiness, but protection. They do not always know the story, and they do not pretend to, but they become less quick to judge the surface. They understand that people often hide where they have once been hurt. They understand that what looks cold may be frightened. What looks distant may be overwhelmed. What looks arrogant may be deeply unsure. What looks strong may be very tired. Again, this does not mean excusing harm. It does not mean letting other people's armour cut us. It does not mean standing in the path of someone else's unhealed pain and calling it compassion. Boundaries matter. Safety matters. But even with boundaries, there can be understanding. Even from a distance, there can be mercy. Even when we step away, we can do so without hatred. The wounded healer is not someone who lets everything in. The wounded healer is someone who knows the difference between an open heart and an unprotected one. There is wisdom in that difference. An open heart can still have a door. An open heart can still rest. An open heart can still say, "Not here. Not this way. Not now." Softness does not mean allowing ourselves to be harmed. Gentleness does not mean disappearing. To heal is not to become boundaryless, it is to become more whole. And wholeness includes tenderness and strength, openness and discernment, compassion for others and compassion for ourselves. Sometimes the armour we most need to loosen is not the armour we wear against other people. It is the armour we wear against ourselves, the refusal to feel, the habit of minimizing what hurt, the voice that says, "It wasn't that bad," the instinct to compare our pain with someone else's and decide we have no right to be tired, the quiet shame that rises when we need comfort. This inner armour may be the heaviest of all, because it keeps us divided from our own experience. It says, "Do not feel that. Do not need that. Do not remember that. Do not be affected." But the soul does not heal by being ordered into silence. The heart does not become peaceful by being dismissed. The wound does not become wise by being denied. Something in us softens only when it is allowed to be real, not exaggerated, not dramatized, simply real. Yes, that hurt. Yes, that mattered. Yes, I was changed by it. Yes, I may still be learning how to live with it. There is dignity in this kind of honesty, a quiet dignity. The dignity of no longer arguing with the truth of your own life. The dignity of putting down the performance, even for a moment. The dignity of letting the inner self be met. And perhaps tonight, as the world grows quieter around you, you might imagine the armour resting. Not thrown away, not destroyed, just resting, placed gently beside you. The armour that helped you cope. The armour that helped you smile. The armour that helped you stay strong. The armour that helped you get through what you had to get through. You do not need to hate it. You do not need to fight it. You can simply let it become less necessary for a while. You can allow the face beneath it to soften. You can allow the breath to deepen. You can allow the body to feel that, in this moment, there is nothing to prove, no role to perform, no perfect answer to give, no need to be impressive, no need to be untouched, no need to hold everything together before you are allowed to rest. Just this, a quiet night, a softer breath, a little space between you and the old defences. And somewhere within, the possibility that the person beneath the armour has always been worthy of kindness. Not because they were useful, not because they were strong, not because they kept going without complaint, but because they were human, tender, living, trying. And perhaps that is enough. Perhaps it has always been enough. The armour we learn to wear may have helped us survive the world, but it is not where we are meant to live forever. There is a self beneath it, a quieter self, a more honest self, a self that does not need to be polished to be loved, a self that does not need to be invulnerable to be safe, a self that can be tired and still worthy, uncertain and still whole, wounded and still capable of great gentleness. So let the armour be light tonight. Let it loosen just a little. Let the mask soften at the edges. Let the deeper self know that it does not have to come rushing forward. It can emerge slowly, in its own time, in its own way. There is no hurry. There is nothing to force, nothing to prove. Only the quiet invitation to rest from the performance, to lay down for a little while the weight of being fine, and to remember that beneath every layer of protection there is still something alive, something tender, something true, something within you that has been waiting patiently to be met with kindness. And tonight, perhaps, kindness is enough. Chapter 4. Meeting the Hidden Room Within. There is a room within us that not everyone sees, a quiet room, a hidden room, a room beneath the surface of what we say, what we do, what we show, and what we manage. For much of life, we may pass by this room without entering it. We may know it is there. We may sense it in certain silences, in the pause after a difficult conversation, in the strange heaviness that arrives after a long day of being fine, in the moment before sleep, when the world becomes quieter and the parts of us we have been avoiding begin to stir. But often we keep walking. We stay busy. We turn on another light. We answer another message. We fill the silence with sound. Not because we are weak, not because we are dishonest, but because the hidden room can feel uncertain. We do not always know what we will find there, and many of us have spent years learning how not to enter. We have learned how to keep going, how to remain useful, how to smile at the right moment, how to make ourselves understandable to the world, how to speak from the surface even when something deeper is asking for attention. But the hidden room waits. It does not force itself open. It does not shout most of the time. It simply remains, patient, dimly lit, holding the things we have not yet known how to hold. The wound often lives there, not always as a dramatic memory, not always as a clear event. Sometimes the wound is more like an atmosphere, a familiar ache, a tightness in the body, a pattern we repeat without knowing why. A fear that rises before the mind has caught up, a sadness that seems older than the moment that woke it. The hidden room is where these things may live, the griefs we hurried past, the fears we made ourselves outgrow too quickly, the disappointments we called small because we did not know how to call them painful, the needs we learned to silence, the younger selves we left behind because life demanded an adult face. And when the armour begins to loosen, when the outer self grows tired of performing, when the mask becomes too heavy to keep in place, we may find ourselves standing at the door of this room. Not ready, perhaps, not certain, but near. And this is a tender moment, a sacredly ordinary moment. The moment when we begin to turn toward what has been waiting inside us. We do not have to open the door all at once. We do not have to rush in bravely. We do not have to name everything we find. The hidden room within is not a place to invade. It is a place to approach gently, like entering a room where someone has been sleeping, like stepping into a quiet chapel of the self, like coming close to a frightened animal that does not yet know whether your hand is safe. The first task is not to fix. The first task is not even to understand. The first task is to arrive kindly, to stand at the threshold and say, softly, I am here. This may sound simple, but it is not always easy. Many of us have learnt to approach ourselves with criticism before compassion. We enter the hidden room carrying a list. What is wrong with me? Why am I still like this? Why can't I not move on? Why do I feel this way? Why am I tired? Why am I afraid? Why does this still matter? And the hidden places within us, hearing this tone, may hide even more deeply. Because no tender thing opens under interrogation. No wound becomes wise by being shamed. No frightened part of us relaxes because we demand that it explain itself. So perhaps, before we enter, we lay the list down, gently, just outside the door. We do not need it tonight. There will be time, perhaps, for understanding. There will be time for reflection. There will be time for change. But first, there is presence. First, there is kindness. First, there is the soft willingness to be with ourselves without turning the self into a problem. Inside the hidden room, we may find parts of ourselves that feel younger than we are now, parts that still remember being overlooked, parts that still expect disappointment, parts that learned to be quiet because needing felt unsafe, parts that became responsible too early, parts that still believe love must be earned, parts that are tired from holding the same breath for years. These parts do not need to be mocked. They do not need to be rushed into maturity. They do not need to be told that everything is fine. They need to be met, gently, honestly, with the kind of patience that says, I understand why you learned this. Perhaps there is a part of you that learned to be strong because there was no one else to lean on. Perhaps there is a part of you that learned to be funny because sadness felt too exposed. Perhaps there is a part of you that learned to please because conflict felt dangerous. Perhaps there is a part of you that learned to stay guarded because openness once cost too much. Perhaps there is a part of you that learned to expect very little because hope once hurt. These parts are not enemies. They are old protectors, old strategies, old forms of survival. They may no longer fit the life you are living now, but they were not created without reason. They were attempts at safety, attempts at belonging, attempts at staying whole when wholeness felt difficult. And when we meet them with gentleness, something begins to change. Not immediately, not dramatically, but quietly. The hidden room becomes less frightening. The parts we had pushed away begin to feel less like shadows and more like guests who have been waiting too long to be welcomed. This is not about becoming lost in the past. It is not about living forever in old pain. It is not about opening every drawer and naming every wound before we are allowed to rest. It is simply about no longer abandoning the rooms within us that most need care. There is a deep loneliness in being unseen by others, but there is another loneliness too. The loneliness of being unseen by ourselves. The loneliness of always moving past our own inner life. The loneliness of telling ourselves to get on with it when something inside is asking, quietly, to be heard. The loneliness of living from the surface while the deeper self waits in the dark. To meet the hidden room within is to begin ending that loneliness. It is to turn toward ourselves and say, I have not forgotten you, even if we have. Even if, for many years, we did not know how to remember. We can begin again. We can begin with one breath, one moment of honesty, one small act of not turning away. Perhaps this is what the wound asks of us most deeply. Not that we solve everything, not that we become perfect, not that we explain the full meaning of our lives, but that we come closer to ourselves. That we stop treating the tender places as intruders, that we learn to sit in the same room as our own truth. The hidden room may contain sorrow, but it may also contain life. This is important. We sometimes fear that if we enter the inner room, we will find only pain, only grief, only fear, only the old wound waiting to swallow us. But often, beneath what hurts, there is also what has been protected, a tenderness that never disappeared, a longing to be known, a quiet hope, a capacity for joy that has been sleeping, a softer self that has been waiting for conditions gently enough to emerge. The hidden room is not only a room of wounds, it is also a room of lost aliveness, the part of you that still notices beauty, the part that still wants peace, the part that still responds to kindness, the part that still knows, somewhere beneath everything, that life can be more than defense. When we meet this room slowly, we may begin to recover more than pain. We may recover feeling. We may recover trust in small amounts. We may recover the ability to rest without feeling guilty. We may recover the sound of our own inner voice beneath all the voices we learned to obey. This voice may be quiet at first, very quiet. It may not sound certain. It may not have grand answers. It may simply say, "I am tired," or "that hurt," or "I need to go slowly," or "I do not want to be so hard on myself anymore." These are not small sentences. They are openings. They are the hidden room beginning to speak. And when it speaks, we do not need to answer immediately. We can listen. We can let the words settle. We can allow truth to exist without turning it instantly into action. There is a kind of healing that begins when truth is finally allowed to stand in the room. Not fixed, not polished, not explained, just allowed. Yes, I was hurt. Yes, I have been tired. Yes, I have been afraid. Yes, I have hidden parts of myself in order to be accepted. Yes, I have carried more than I knew how to say. And yes, even with all of this, I am still here, still worthy, still becoming, still capable of tenderness. The hidden room within does not need to become a courtroom. It can become a place of return, a place where the self is gathered back, piece by piece, memory by memory, breath by breath. Not all in one night, not all in one season, but gently, over time. The wounded healer is someone who has begun to enter this room, not perfectly, not fearlessly, but honestly enough. They have sat with some part of themselves that once felt unacceptable. They have learned, perhaps, that the pain they feared was not the whole room. They have found, behind the fear, a deeper humanity. And because of this, they are less frightened by the hidden rooms in others. They do not need another person to be simple. They do not need every feeling to make sense at once. They do not panic when someone says, "I do not know why I feel this way." They understand that the inner life can be layered, that the heart may speak through symbols before it can speak in sentences, that a wound may take time before it trusts the light. This is why their presence can feel safe. They have been inside themselves enough to know that darkness is not always danger. Sometimes darkness is simply what has not yet been met. Sometimes the hidden room is only waiting for a gentler visitor. And perhaps tonight, you can become that gentler visitor to yourself. Not the critic, not the interrogator, not the fixer, not the one who demands progress, just the one who arrives softly, the one who says, "I am willing to be here." You do not have to enter every corner. You do not have to open every box. You do not have to understand every shadow. You can simply stand inside the doorway and breathe. Let the room be as it is. Let the old things rest where they are. Let the tender parts know that you are not here to punish them. You are not here to drag them into the light. You are not here to make them useful. You are only here to stop leaving them alone. That may be enough, more than enough. There is no rush. The hidden room has waited this long. It can wait gently now. It does not need to be solved before morning. It does not need to be emptied. It does not need to be transformed into wisdom tonight. It can simply be held in awareness, softly, quietly, with a little more compassion than before. And as you breathe, perhaps you may notice that the room is not as cold as it once felt. Perhaps there is a small light somewhere, not bright, not demanding, just enough to see the outline of what is here. A chair, a window, a memory, a younger self, a quiet hope, a wound that no longer needs to hide completely. You can sit there for a moment, only a moment. You can let yourself be near what is true without being overwhelmed by it. You can remind yourself that you are not the same person who first entered that pain. You are here now, older, perhaps tired, perhaps still healing, but here, with more tenderness than you once knew how to offer, with more language, more patience, more understanding, more capacity to stay. And if staying feels difficult, you can leave the door open and come back another time. There is kindness in leaving slowly. There is wisdom in knowing when enough has been touched for one night. The hidden room will not disappear because you rest. The healing will not be lost because you sleep. You do not have to remain awake to prove that you care. For tonight, perhaps, it is enough simply to know that the room exists, that it is part of you, that it contains pain, yes, but not only pain, that somewhere within it, something tender is still waiting for kindness. And perhaps kindness has already begun, in the listening, in the softening, in the decision not to turn away completely. So let this thought rest beside you. There is a hidden room within you, and you do not need to be afraid of it tonight. You do not need to enter it alone with harshness. You do not need to force it open. You can approach it slowly, gently, with a quieter heart, with the simple understanding that whatever is inside you is not there to shame you. It is there because you are human, because life has touched you, because parts of you learned to protect themselves, because parts of you are still waiting to be welcomed home. And one day, perhaps, the hidden room will not feel hidden anymore. It will simply feel like part of the house. A room you can enter without fear. A room where the old wound can rest. A room where tenderness is not exiled. A room where you can sit with yourself and know, quietly, that nothing human within you needs to be hated. For now, breathe. Let the door remain softly open. Let the light be small. Let the room be quiet. Let the parts of you that have waited so long feel, perhaps for the first time in a long time, that someone kind has come near. And for tonight, that is enough. Chapter 5. When we stop trying to fix everything. There comes a point, sometimes quietly, sometimes after a long struggle, when we begin to understand that not everything can be fixed, at least not quickly, not neatly, not by force of will, not by finding the perfect sentence, the perfect explanation, the perfect piece of advice, the perfect plan. Some things in life do not ask to be fixed first. They ask to be felt. They ask to be witnessed. They ask to be allowed to exist for a while without being hurried into usefulness. And this can be difficult to accept, because many of us have been taught, in quiet ways and obvious ways, that pain is a problem to solve, that discomfort means something has gone wrong, that sadness should be corrected, that fear should be overcome, that uncertainty should be managed, that grief should move along at a reasonable pace, that if someone is hurting, we should know what to say, and if we are hurting, we should know what to do. But human life is not always so obedient. The heart does not heal simply because we tell it to. The body does not relax simply because the mind has decided it should. The old wound does not close because we are tired of carrying it. And other people's pain does not become lighter just because we cannot bear to see it. So much of our fixing comes from love. It comes from care. It comes from the wish to reduce suffering. It comes from that tender instinct that says, I do not want you to hurt. And there is kindness in that. There is nothing wrong with wanting to help, nothing wrong with offering comfort, nothing wrong with looking for a way through. But sometimes, beneath the wish to help, there is also our own discomfort, our own fear of helplessness, our own unease in the presence of something we cannot control. When someone we love is in pain, it can awaken a deep restlessness in us. We want to do something, say something, change something, make it better, make it stop. Not only for them, but perhaps also because their pain touches something unhealed in us. It reminds us of our own uncertainty, our own losses, our own fear that life can break open in ways no one can fully prevent. And so we may rush. We may offer advice before we have listened. We may look for the bright side before the dark has been allowed to speak. We may try to turn the pain into a lesson before the person has had a chance to breathe. We may say, at least it was not worse. At least you are strong. At least you learned something. At least you still have this or that. And sometimes these words are well meant, but often they move too quickly. They step past the wound instead of sitting beside it. They ask the suffering person to rise into perspective before they have been met in the place where they are. Real comfort moves more slowly. It does not rush to repair the moment. It does not panic in the presence of tears. It does not treat silence as failure. It does not require pain to become meaningful before it is allowed to be real. Sometimes the most healing thing we can offer another person is not a solution. It is steadiness, a calm presence, a listening face, a silence that does not withdraw, a willingness to remain in the room without trying to rearrange everything inside it. This is not passivity. It is not indifference. It is not doing nothing because we do not care. It is a deeper kind of care. The kind that understands that some pain cannot be carried away by words. Some pain must be accompanied. Some pain must be given time. Some pain must be held gently enough that the person inside it does not have to feel alone. The wounded healer knows this, not because they have read it somewhere, but because at some point, perhaps, they have needed it themselves. They have known the ache of being advised when they needed to be heard. They have known the loneliness of being told to look on the bright side when they were still standing in the dark. They have known how it feels when someone tries to tidy your pain because your pain makes them uncomfortable. And they have known the rare relief of meeting someone who does not rush, someone who lets the silence breathe, someone who understands that tears do not always need interruption, someone who can sit beside the wound without needing to turn it into a project. This kind of presence can feel simple, but it is not always easy. Because to stop fixing everything, we must meet our own helplessness. We must feel the limits of our control. We must admit that love does not always give us power over outcomes, that caring deeply does not mean we can prevent all suffering, that being wise does not mean having an answer for every sorrow. This is humbling. And perhaps that humility is part of the healing. The ego likes to fix. It likes to feel useful. It likes to know. It likes to stand above the problem and arrange the pieces. It likes to say, here is what this means. Here is what you should do. Here is how this can be solved. But the deeper self knows that not all pain is a puzzle. Some pain is a landscape, something to move through slowly, something to cross with patience, something that changes us as we walk. When we stop trying to fix everything, we begin to listen differently. We listen not only for the problem, but for the person. We listen for what is being said and what is too tender to say. We listen for the fear beneath the anger, the grief beneath the silence, the exhaustion beneath the competence, the shame beneath the explanation. We stop asking only, how can I solve this? And begin to ask, quietly, how can I be with this? That question changes everything. How can I be with this? Not how can I erase it? Not how can I control it? Not how can I make it more comfortable for me? But how can I be present without adding pressure? How can I offer warmth without taking over? How can I listen without turning the other person into a task? How can I stay gentle in the face of what I cannot immediately change? This is also a question we may learn to ask ourselves. When our own pain rises, when our own old wound is touched, when anxiety returns, when grief appears in some unexpected doorway, when the body feels heavy, or the mind feels tired, or the heart feels more fragile than we expected, we can pause. We can breathe. And instead of asking, how do I get rid of this as quickly as possible? We might ask, how can I be with myself in this? Not perfectly, not dramatically, just kindly. Can I stop attacking myself for feeling what I feel? Can I stop demanding that I recover on a schedule? Can I stop turning every ache into evidence that I am failing? Can I make a little room? Can I let this moment be difficult without deciding that I am broken? There is a quiet mercy in this, the mercy of no longer treating every inner difficulty as an emergency. The mercy of understanding that some feelings pass more gently when they are not chased away. The mercy of sitting beside ourselves as we might sit beside someone we love and saying, I am here. I am not leaving just because this is hard. Perhaps this is one of the deepest changes the wound can bring. It teaches us that presence is not less than fixing. Sometimes presence is the healing. Not the whole healing, not the only thing needed, but a beginning. A place where the frightened nervous system can unclench. A place where the lonely part of us can feel accompanied. A place where the wound does not have to shout so loudly because, at last, someone is listening. And slowly, when we stop trying to fix everything, we may notice that life becomes less of a battle. There are still practical things to do. There are still choices to make. There are still conversations, boundaries, changes, repairs, decisions. This is not an invitation to avoid life. But there is a difference between responding and forcing, between caring and controlling, between helping and rescuing, between being present and taking responsibility for everything. Many people who have been wounded become fixers. They learn early to watch the room, to sense the mood, to smooth the conflict, to anticipate needs, to become useful before they are asked, to prevent disappointment by working harder, to keep everyone else steady so they do not have to feel the instability beneath their own feet. And this can look like kindness. Sometimes it is kindness, but it can also become exhausting, because no one person can hold the whole world together. No one person can heal every wound, soften every conflict, prevent every sadness, or rescue every heart they love. And there may come a time when the fixer inside us needs rest. Not rejection, rest. We can honour the part of us that tried so hard, the part that wanted everyone safe, the part that believed love meant never letting anything fall apart, the part that stayed alert, stayed ready, stayed responsible. We can say softly, "Thank you. You were trying to protect us." And then perhaps, "You do not have to do everything now." This is a tender unlearning. To let others have their own process. To let silence remain silence for a while. To let someone be sad without making their sadness our failure. To let ourselves be tired without turning tiredness into guilt. To let healing unfold at a human pace. There is a kind of love that tries to carry everything. And there is a kind of love that learns to sit beside what cannot be carried away. The second kind may be quieter, less dramatic, less praised. But it is deeply powerful. It says, "I am here with you. Not above you, not ahead of you, not dragging you somewhere you are not ready to go. Here, beside you, for now." That may be all another person can receive, and sometimes it may be all we can offer. There is peace in knowing this. A sad peace, perhaps, but a real one. The peace of releasing the impossible burden of total repair. The peace of understanding that presence matters. The peace of knowing that we can care without controlling, love without rescuing, listen without solving, rest without having completed every task of the soul. Because tonight, there is nothing you need to fix before you're allowed to be at ease. You do not have to fix the past. You do not have to fix every relationship. You do not have to fix the wound completely. You do not have to fix the tiredness, the uncertainty, the unfinished places within you. You can simply meet them with a little more gentleness, a little more room, a little more patience. You can let the mind loosen its grip around the question of how. How do I solve this? How do I change this? How do I understand this? How do I make it all make sense? And instead, for this moment, you can rest in a softer question. Can I be with this kindly? Can I let this be here without becoming afraid of myself? Can I place one hand, even just inwardly, on the tender place and say, I know this has been hard. There may be no answer tonight, and that is all right. Not every night is for answers. Some nights are for laying down the tools, for setting aside the endless repair work, for letting the soul stop kneeling beside every broken thing. Some nights are for breathing, for softening, for remembering that you are not a machine made to solve pain. You are a human being, living, feeling, learning, resting. And even the healer within you, the one who wants so much to help, the one who can sense the ache in others, the one who wishes no one had to feel alone, even that part of you needs rest, especially that part. So let the fixer rest tonight. Let the helper rest. Let the one who listens, the one who carries, the one who notices everything, lay down the weight for a while. You do not have to abandon anyone by resting. You do not have to solve the wound to honour it. You do not have to become untouched to be peaceful. For now, just allow this gentle truth to settle. Some things are healed not by being forced closed, but by being held open with compassion. Some pain softens not because we command it to leave, but because we stop leaving ourselves when it arrives. Some wounds become doorways only after we stop trying to brick them over. And perhaps this is enough for tonight, to stop fixing, to stop forcing, to stop turning every tender place into a task, to breathe softly beside what is unfinished, to let the night be wide enough to hold what you cannot carry alone, and to remember, quietly, that presence is not nothing. Gentleness is not nothing. Staying with yourself is not nothing. It is the beginning of a different kind of healing, one that moves slowly, one that does not shout, one that asks nothing of you for this moment except that you soften, breathe, and rest. And maybe for tonight, that is enough. Chapter 6. The Quiet Gift of Having Been There. There is a certain kind of comfort that does not need many words. It does not arrive with explanations. It does not arrive with advice already prepared. It does not stand at the doorway of another person's pain and announce that everything happens for a reason. It simply enters quietly. It sits down. It listens. It stays. And somehow, without needing to say very much at all, it lets the other person feel less alone. This kind of comfort often comes from those who have been there in some way, not necessarily to the same place, not necessarily through the same story, the same loss, the same fear, the same ache, but to the inward country of pain, to the place where words become difficult, to the place where the usual answers do not reach, to the place where life feels too large to organize, and the heart is doing its best to continue. There is a quiet gift in having been there. Not a gift anyone would ask for, not a gift that makes the wound worthwhile, not a gift that erases what happened. But still, in time, something may grow from the place where we have suffered honestly. A deeper listening, a slower judgment, a softer presence. A way of recognizing, without needing to intrude, when another person is carrying more than they are saying. The person who has been there often knows that pain has many faces. It may not always look like tears. Sometimes it looks like silence. Sometimes it looks like busyness. Sometimes it looks like anger over something small when the true burden is much larger. Sometimes it looks like making jokes at exactly the moment when the truth is too near. Sometimes it looks like being perfectly organized, perfectly polite, perfectly functional, while something inside is trembling. And because they have known something of this in themselves, they do not always believe the surface. They do not assume that a calm voice means a calm heart. They do not assume that a smile means ease. They do not assume that strength means the absence of pain. They know that human beings often carry their most tender things quietly, and so their care becomes quieter too. Less forceful, less demanding, more patient. Perhaps you have met someone like this, someone who did not need you to explain everything before they understood something. Someone who could hear the tiredness in your voice, even when your words were ordinary. Someone who did not push you toward confession, but also did not look away from the truth. Someone who made you feel that whatever you were carrying did not make you strange, did not make you weak, did not make you too much. There are people whose presence feels like a room with the lights turned low, a place where the nervous system can unclench, a place where the guarded parts of us begin, slowly, to breathe. They may not do anything impressive. They may not say anything profound. They may simply be steady. And steadiness, when we are hurting, can feel like shelter. The quiet gift of having been there is not expertise. It is recognition. It is the deep, wordless understanding that says, I may not know your exact pain, but I know something of the place you are standing. And that recognition can change everything, because so much suffering becomes heavier when it is unseen. Pain is already difficult, but pain carried in isolation becomes something else. It becomes a room without windows, a long corridor with no answering voice, a feeling that not only are we hurting, but we are hurting incorrectly, secretly, shamefully, in a way no one else would understand. When someone recognizes us gently, they open a window in that room. They do not remove the whole sorrow. They do not pretend the wound is gone, but they let in air. They let in the possibility that we are not alone in being human. And sometimes that is the first mercy. Not a cure, not a solution. A mercy. The mercy of being met. There are many ways to be met. A quiet message at the right time. A hand placed gently over ours. A cup of tea made without asking too many questions. A pause in which someone does not rush to fill the silence. A simple sentence. I am here. I believe you. That sounds heavy. You do not have to explain it perfectly. I am not going anywhere just because this is hard. These are small things, but small things are not always small to the heart. Sometimes a soft word lands in the exact place where we were most afraid. Sometimes a patient silence gives us permission to stop performing. Sometimes the calm presence of another person becomes a bridge back to ourselves. The wounded healer understands this. They understand that healing is not always dramatic. It is not always a great turning point. It is not always a breakthrough, or a revelation, or the sudden arrival of peace. Sometimes healing begins when someone sits with us long enough for us to stop pretending. Sometimes it begins when we are allowed to be tired without being corrected. Sometimes it begins when our tears are not treated as a problem. Sometimes it begins when another person's steadiness helps us feel that maybe, just maybe, we can remain with ourselves too. This is the quiet gift. To have been there is to know that the person in pain does not always need a map. Sometimes they need a companion. Not someone to drag them forward, not someone to explain the landscape too quickly. Just someone who can walk beside them for a little while. Someone who can say, without saying it aloud, I know this road is hard. We can go slowly. There is deep kindness in going slowly. The world often does not go slowly. The world measures recovery in visible signs. Are you back at work? Are you smiling again? Are you answering messages? Are you functioning? Are you moving on? But the inner life has its own timing. The soul is not always impressed by appearances. A person may look recovered long before they feel restored. They may return to ordinary tasks while still feeling far away from themselves. They may laugh at dinner and cry in the car. They may do what needs to be done and still feel that some part of them is waiting to be found. The person who has been there knows this. They do not confuse functioning with healing. They do not mistake quiet for peace. They do not assume that because someone is coping, they are no longer carrying. And so they offer a different kind of patience, the kind that does not expire quickly, the kind that does not say, "Are you still upset about that?" The kind that understands that grief, anxiety, disappointment, and old pain may return in waves, not because the person is failing, not because they have gone backwards, but because healing is often circular, layered, seasonal. A thing we meet again and again, each time with a little more tenderness, a little more understanding, a little more breath. There is no perfect way to be wounded. There is no perfect way to heal. And someone who has been there may know this more deeply than anyone. They know that some days we rise with courage, and some days we simply rise. They know that a good day does not erase the wound, and a difficult day does not erase the progress. They know that strength may look like action in one season, and rest in another. They know that sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is not to push forward, but to stop abandoning themselves. And because they know this, they become safer to be around. Not perfect, not endlessly available, not without their own limits, but safer. Because they are not frightened by the ordinary truth of suffering. They do not need every feeling to be tidy. They do not require the wounded person to become inspiring. This matters. There can be a strange pressure placed on pain. The pressure to make it meaningful, to turn it into growth, to become stronger because of it, to emerge transformed, grateful, wise, shining. But not all pain wants to be turned into a speech. Not all wounds want to become a lesson. Some pain needs simply to be honoured. It happened. It mattered. It changed something. And before it becomes anything else, it deserves to be met with honesty. The quiet gift of having been there is that we are less likely to rush another person into meaning. We know, perhaps, how unkind that can feel, how lonely it can be when someone wants us to be better before we are ready, how heavy it can be when the world is more comfortable with our growth than with our grief. So we do not hurry. We leave space. We allow the person to be where they are. This is not the same as leaving them there forever. It is not giving up. It is trusting that the heart moves more safely when it is not being chased. In time, perhaps meaning comes. In time, perhaps the wound becomes a doorway. In time, perhaps compassion grows in the place where pain once felt like the whole sky. But in the beginning, and often long after the beginning, there is simply presence. Presence beside the difficult thing. Presence beside the unanswered question. Presence beside the person who does not yet know how to speak of what they carry. To offer this presence is a quiet act of love, and to receive it is also an act of courage, because being truly met can feel vulnerable. If we have worn armour for a long time, kindness may feel unfamiliar. If we have spent years being the one who manages, being cared for may feel strange. If we have learned to keep our pain private, being seen may feel both relieving and frightening. The heart may open slowly. That is all right. Nothing tender should be forced. The gift of recognition can wait outside the door. It does not need to break in. It does not need to demand trust. It simply remains available. Steady, quiet, patient. And perhaps, little by little, the guarded place begins to believe it is safe. There is a tenderness in knowing that we do not have to be healed beyond all pain to offer kindness. Sometimes people believe they must be perfectly whole before they can be of any comfort to another. But perhaps wholeness does not mean being untouched. Perhaps wholeness means being honest, aware of our limits, gentle with our wounds, careful not to pour our pain into another person's hands, willing to listen without making their story about ours. The wounded healer is not someone who uses another person's pain to display their own. They do not say, "I know exactly how you feel," because they understand that no one knows exactly. They do not take over the room. They do not make themselves the center. They simply allow their own experience to deepen their humility. They know enough to know they do not know everything. And this humility is part of their gift. They come close without taking possession. They listen without claiming authority over another person's sorrow. They understand that every wound has its own language. Every heart has its own history. Every healing has its own pace. So they do not insist. They accompany. And maybe this is one of the gentlest forms of wisdom. To accompany, to be with, to walk beside, to sit near, to stay human in the presence of another human being. No grand performance, no perfect script, no need to be impressive. Just the quiet offering of presence shaped by experience. If you have been through difficulty, perhaps you carry more of this gift than you realize. Perhaps there are moments when your own pain has made you more careful with someone else. Perhaps you have noticed sadness in a friend's voice. Perhaps you have been patient with a silence you once might have misunderstood. Perhaps you have softened where once you would have judged. Perhaps you have learned not to say, "at least," when someone is grieving.
Perhaps you have learned to ask, would you like advice, or would you like me just to listen?
Perhaps you have learned that the deepest comfort is often simple. You are here. I am here. We do not have to solve it all in this moment. That is no small thing. To make another person feel less alone is no small thing. To bring gentleness into a harsh moment is no small thing. To listen without rushing is no small thing. These are quiet gifts, often unseen, often unmeasured, but deeply real. And perhaps tonight, you might also offer this same gift inwardly, to yourself, to the part of you that has been there, to the part that knows the long road, to the part that has carried more than others saw, to the part that kept going, even when it did not feel strong. Instead of asking that part to explain everything, perhaps you can sit beside it, gently, without judgment, without hurry. You might say inwardly, I know this has not always been easy. And perhaps that is enough.
Not everything within you needs to be healed tonight. Not everything needs to be named.
Not every wound needs to become wisdom before sleep comes. Some parts of us simply need to feel that we are no longer turning away from them, that we can offer ourselves the same quiet presence we might offer someone else, a listening presence, a patient presence, a presence that does not leave. The quiet gift of having been there is not only for others. It can become a way of returning to ourselves. We can learn to recognize our own pain without panic, to honor our own tiredness without shame, to sit beside our own uncertainty without demanding immediate certainty. This too is healing. This too is compassion. And so, as the night settles around you, let this thought rest gently. The places you have been may have changed you. Some of them may have hurt. Some of them may still feel tender. But they may also have given you a deeper way of seeing, a softer way of listening,
a quieter way of understanding the hidden burdens of others.
Not because pain is noble, not because suffering was fair, but because you remained human through it. Because something in you, even if only faintly, kept a doorway open, a doorway to kindness, a doorway to patience, a doorway to the simple recognition that everyone, somewhere, is carrying a private story. And tonight, you do not have to carry every story. You do not have to be the healer for everyone. You do not have to offer comfort beyond your own strength. You can rest. You can let yourself be held by the same gentleness you have offered or wished to offer to others. You can remember that having been there does not mean you must always return there. It only means that if another person finds themselves in a darkened room, you may know how to leave a light on. And for tonight, perhaps, that is enough. A small light, a quiet room, a softer breath. The knowledge that you have known pain, and still there is kindness in you. Still there is tenderness. Still there is the possibility of rest. So let the night be gentle. Let the old roads grow quiet. Let the part of you that has been there know that it is safe, for now, to lay down. You are not required to guide anyone through the dark tonight. You are not required to explain the wound. You are not required to turn experience into wisdom before morning. Simply breathe. Simply rest. And let the quiet gift of your own humanity remain beside you, softly, patiently, without needing to ask anything more.
Chapter 7. Compassion without performance. Compassion does not always need to announce itself. It does not always need the perfect words. It does not need to arrive beautifully dressed, with wisdom prepared and understanding already complete. Sometimes compassion is very quiet. A chair pulled closer, a message sent without expectation, a pause before judgment, a silence that does not withdraw, a willingness to remain gentle even when there is nothing impressive to say. There is a kind of compassion that performs. It wants to be seen being kind. It wants to be recognized as patient, loving, generous, wise. It rushes toward another person's pain, not always to meet the person, but sometimes to feel useful, needed, good. And this is not something to condemn harshly. Most of us have done this in small ways. Most of us have at some point wanted our kindness to matter, wanted our care to be received, wanted our help to help. There is something very human in that.
But true compassion, the kind that settles softly into the room, does not need to be the centre of the moment. It does not need to turn another person's wound into evidence of its own goodness. It does not need to be praised for staying. It simply stays, quietly, gently, without making a ceremony of itself. Compassion without performance is one of the most peaceful forms of love. It does not hurry to be visible. It does not try to become the answer. It does not turn someone else's sadness into a stage. It does not say, "Look how understanding I am." It says, in quieter ways, "You are safe to be human here." And sometimes that is the sentence we most need, even if no one speaks it aloud. You are safe to be human here. Safe to be unfinished. Safe to be tired. Safe to be uncertain. Safe to not yet know what any of it means. Safe to have no inspiring conclusion. Safe to still be hurting, even after time has passed. This kind of compassion has room in it. Room for the person as they are. Room for pain without pressure. Room for silence without embarrassment. Room for a wound that does not heal according to anyone else's schedule. It is not dramatic. It is not forceful. It is not interested in being remembered as heroic. It has a softer rhythm. It breathes. It listens. It allows. The wounded healer may come to understand this slowly, because someone who has been wounded knows how painful it can be when care feels like performance. They know what it is like to be turned into a project, to have someone lean too eagerly into their sadness, to feel that their pain has become part of another person's identity as the helper, the rescuer, the wise one, the strong one, the one who knows what should happen next. And perhaps they remember how lonely that can feel. Because when compassion becomes performance, the wounded person may disappear inside the helper's need to be helpful. Their real experience may become smaller than the story being told about it. Their pace may be ignored. Their silence may be invaded. Their pain may be shaped into something more convenient for the person trying to comfort them. But compassion without performance does not do this. It does not take over. It does not invade. It does not demand that the wound become understandable to outsiders before it is allowed to be respected. It does not need to know everything in order to be kind. This is important. We do not need the full story to be gentle. We do not need every detail. We do not need proof that someone's pain is justified. We do not need to measure their suffering against our own. We do not need to decide whether we would have reacted the same way. Compassion begins before judgment finishes its argument. It begins with the simple recognition that another human being is carrying something. And that carrying something can be hard. Sometimes that is enough. Not enough to fix everything. Not enough to explain everything, but enough to soften the way we arrive. Enough to lower the voice. Enough to leave space. Enough to stop turning every human difficulty into a courtroom where someone must prove their right to hurt. There is a quiet cruelty in always requiring explanation. Why are you still upset? Why did that affect you so much? Why can't you just let it go? Why didn't you say something sooner? Why are you tired when everything looks fine? These questions may sometimes come from confusion, but they can land like accusation. They ask the wounded person to defend their own tenderness, to justify their own nervous system, to make a case for their own humanity. Compassion without performance asks less. It may ask gently, "Would you like to talk?" It may ask, "What would help right now?" It may ask, "Do you need advice, or would listening be better?" Or it may ask nothing at all. It may simply remain nearby, not in a way that pressures, not in a way that watches too closely, but in a way that says, "You do not have to manage my discomfort while you are already managing your own." That is a rare gift. To be with someone who does not make us care for them while they are trying to care for us. To be with someone who can tolerate the awkwardness of not knowing what to do. To be with someone who can admit quietly, "I do not have the perfect words, but I am here." There is great honesty in that, and great relief, because often the perfect words do not exist. When someone is grieving, frightened, ashamed, exhausted, or quietly breaking under the weight of something unseen, there may be no sentence that can make it all better. But there may be a presence that makes it less lonely. There may be a kindness that does not explain the pain away. There may be a listening so gentle that the heart feels for a moment it does not have to brace. This is compassion without performance. It does not confuse being unable to fix with being unable to love. It understands that love may be most real when it stops trying to prove itself, when it stops rushing, when it stops filling every space with sound, when it becomes calm enough to let the other person exist. There is a deep humility in this. To offer compassion quietly, we must let go of the need to be impressive. We must let go of the wish to be seen as the one who knows. We must let go of the role of rescuer, the role of savior, the role of the emotionally superior one. We must come down from above and sit beside, not over, beside. The word beside is gentle. It does not dominate. It does not lead too aggressively. It does not push from behind. It simply shares space. And sometimes, sharing space is the most honest thing we can do. Pain can make people feel exiled from ordinary life. It can make them feel as if they have stepped outside the world everyone else is living in. Everyone else seems to continue. Messages arrive, meals are made, cars pass in the street, the day moves on, and yet, inside, something has stopped. Something has changed. Something is still sitting in the room where the wound happened. Compassion without performance does not demand that the person return immediately to the pace of the world. It is willing to slow down. It sits at the slower rhythm of the wounded place. It does not say, "Come on, we need to move." It says, "I can be here a little while." And that little while matters. Sometimes we cannot offer more than a little while. That is all right. Compassion does not require us to abandon ourselves. It does not require endless availability. It does not require us to become the container for everyone else's pain. Real compassion includes limits. A tired heart cannot offer true presence forever without rest. A wounded person cannot heal others by disappearing into their needs. The helper also has a body. The listener also has a life. The healer also has wounds that need kindness. So compassion without performance is honest about capacity. It does not promise what it cannot give. It does not confuse self-sacrifice with love. It does not turn exhaustion into virtue. It knows that sometimes the most compassionate thing is to be clear. I care about you. I cannot hold all of this tonight. I want to support you, and I also need rest.
let us find more help. I am here, and I am human too. There is no failure in this. There is only truth, and truth, spoken gently, can be part of compassion. The wounded healer must learn this, perhaps more than anyone, because those who know pain may feel drawn to the pain of others. They may recognize it quickly. They may want to help immediately. They may feel responsible for easing every ache they encounter. But if they are not careful, their own compassion can become another form of armour, another way to be needed, another way to avoid their own inner room by tending endlessly to everyone else's. Compassion without performance asks for balance. It asks us to care without vanishing, to listen without absorbing, to help without controlling, to stay human, even in the role of comforter. This is a quiet and mature kind of kindness. It does not burn brightly and then disappear. It does not overwhelm the person receiving it. It does not make promises that become burdens. It is steady, modest, grounded. It understands that a small kindness offered truthfully is better than a grand kindness offered from depletion. A gentle word, a meal left at the door, a short walk beside someone, a small check-in, a patient look, a willingness to say, "I do not know what to say." These things may seem ordinary, but ordinary kindness is often the kind that reaches deepest, because it does not ask the wounded person to respond with gratitude on demand. It does not ask them to become part of a beautiful story. It simply helps life feel a little less unbearable, a little warmer, a little more accompanied. And there is healing in that, quiet healing, the kind no one posts about, the kind that happens in kitchens, in cars, in late-night messages, in pauses between words, in the simple act of someone remembering. Remembering that today might be difficult. Remembering that the anniversary may hurt. Remembering that strong people still need checking on. Remembering that the one who comforts others may also need comfort. This kind of remembering is compassion. Not loud, not decorative, but real. Perhaps we could say that compassion without performance is compassion that has forgotten itself. It is not self-conscious. It is not watching itself in the mirror. It is not asking, "Am I being kind enough? Am I being wise enough? Am I being seen as good?" It is turned gently towards the other. And when turned toward oneself, it carries the same simplicity. Because we also perform compassion towards ourselves sometimes. We may say the right phrases while secretly still judging ourselves. We may speak of self-care while forcing ourselves to recover quickly. You may claim to be patient with our pain while quietly measuring how long it is taking. But true self-compassion is quieter. It does not need to sound enlightened. It may be as simple as loosening the shoulders, taking one slower breath, letting the body rest, allowing the sentence, "This is hard," without immediately adding, "and I should be handling it better." Self-compassion without performance does not require us to become perfectly gentle overnight. It does not require candles, rituals, beautiful language, or a fully healed heart. It begins in a small refusal to be cruel to ourselves, a small pause before the old criticism, a small softening around the tired place, a small willingness to say, "Of course this hurts. I am human. Of course this hurts. There is such mercy in that. Of course grief hurts. Of course disappointment hurts. Of course rejection hurts. Of course uncertainty unsettles the body. Of course old wounds can ache when touched by new moments. Of course you are tired after carrying so much." There is nothing dramatic in saying this, nothing indulgent. It is simply true. And truth, met gently, can become a place of rest. Maybe tonight, compassion does not need to become anything big.
Maybe it does not need to reach across the whole world. Maybe it begins here, in this quiet moment, with you, with the way you speak inwardly to the parts of yourself that are still tender, with the way you stop demanding that every feeling become useful, with the way you allow yourself to be unfinished without turning it into shame. There is no need to perform healing, no need to perform wisdom, no need to perform peace. If peace is here, let it be here. If peace is not here, you do not have to pretend. You can still be met gently. You can still rest. You can still be worthy of tenderness. The quiet heart does not need an audience. The deepest kindness often moves unseen. And perhaps the kindness you have offered in your life, the real kindness, the most human kindness, has often been small and almost invisible. The times you did not say the sharp thing, the times you listened for one more minute, the times you softened towards someone you did not fully understand, the times you let yourself cry instead of turning everything into strength, the times you chose not to abandon yourself. These are not performances. They are little acts of mercy. And mercy, even when small, changes the atmosphere of a life. It makes room. It lowers the heat. It lets the frightened places breathe. It reminds the wounded parts that they are not problems to be displayed or solved, but living places to be held with care. So perhaps tonight, compassion can become very simple. No grand gesture, no shining transformation, no role to play, just a quiet willingness to meet life without hardening more than you need to. A willingness to let others be human. A willingness to let yourself be human too. A willingness to be gentle without needing to be seen as gentle. To care without needing to control. To listen without needing to fix. To rest without needing to justify your rest. This is enough. There is nothing to prove tonight. You do not have to become a better person before sleep. You do not have to become more patient, more wise, more healed, more useful. You do not have to turn your compassion into a task. You can let it be small, let it be quiet, let it be as simple as one soft breath offered to the part of you that has been trying so hard. One gentle thought, one unclenching of the hand, one moment of not turning against yourself. And maybe, in that smallness, there is something deeply true. Compassion without performance, kindness without display, love without theatre, presence without pressure. The wounded heart does not always need brilliance. Sometimes it needs quiet. Sometimes it needs warmth. Sometimes it needs someone, even if that someone is your own deeper self, to sit beside it and say nothing for a while. So let this be a quiet while. Let the night ask nothing grand from you. Let the old need to prove your goodness soften. Let the helper rest. Let the performer step aside. Let the part of you that is simply human be enough. Because it is enough. Without the performance, without the perfect words, without the mask of endless strength. Your kindness, when it is quiet and honest, is enough. Your presence, when it is gentle and real, is enough. And tonight, you may offer that presence inward, softly, patiently, without needing anyone to see, without needing anything to change quickly. Just this breath, this stillness, this simple mercy. The kind that does not announce itself, the kind that does not hurry, the kind that sits close in the dark and whispers without needing to be heard by anyone else. You are safe to be human here. And for tonight, that is enough. Chapter 8. The difference between carrying pain and being ruled by it. There is a difference between carrying pain and being ruled by it. It is a quiet difference, not always visible from the outside. Sometimes no one else would be able to tell. A person may go to work, answer messages, smile at the right moments, make dinner, care for others, and still be carrying something deep within them. Another person may do many of the same things, but inside, the wound has become the center of every room. The difference is not always about how much pain there is. It is not always about how strong someone appears. It is not even about how long ago the wound began. Sometimes the difference is simply this. When we carry pain, it is part of us. When we are ruled by pain, it begins to decide who we are allowed to become. It chooses the tone of the day. It shapes what we believe is possible. It tells us who to trust, what to fear, where to stop, what to avoid, what to expect. It speaks in the voice of certainty. It says, "This will always happen." It is not safe to hope. People cannot be trusted. You are too damaged. You must stay guarded. You must never let life reach you like that again. And for a while, perhaps, we listen, not because we are weak, not because we lack wisdom, but because pain can be persuasive. A wound, especially one that has not yet been met with tenderness, can sound like truth. It can sound like protection. It can sound like common sense. It can say, "I'm only trying to keep you safe." And sometimes, in the beginning, this is exactly what it is trying to do. A hurt part of us may build walls because walls make sense after harm. A frightened part may become watchful because watchfulness once helped us survive. A disappointed part may lower expectations because hoping once felt dangerous. A grieving part may move slowly because the world has changed and it needs time to understand the new shape of things. So we do not shame the pain for trying to protect us. We do not attack the wound for speaking loudly. We do not call ourselves broken because some part of us learned to be afraid. We simply begin, slowly, to notice. Is this pain asking to be honored? Or is it trying to govern the whole life? Is this fear offering information? Or is it closing every door? Is this memory asking for care? Or is it deciding the future before the future has arrived? These are gentle questions. They are not accusations. They are lanterns. Small lights held near the inner life, helping us see where we are. Because carrying pain is human. Being ruled by pain is exhausting. Carrying pain may mean acknowledging that something hurt. Being ruled by pain may mean believing that hurt is the only truth. Carrying pain may mean remembering with sadness. Being ruled by pain may mean living as though the wound is still happening in every moment. Carrying pain may mean protecting ourselves wisely. Being ruled by pain may mean never allowing anything tender to come close again. And the movement from one to the other is not always simple. It takes time. It takes patience. It takes many moments of returning again and again to the body, to the breath, to the present moment, to the quiet truth that what happened may have changed us, but it does not have to become the only author of our life. This is not the same as denying pain. It is not the same as saying, "Move on." It is not the same as pretending the wound has no power. Pain does have power. It can shape memory. It can shape the nervous system. It can shape expectation. It can teach the body to brace before the mind knows why. It can make ordinary moments feel unsafe because they resemble something old. It can return in dreams, in reactions, in silences, in the sudden tightening of the chest. To carry pain wisely is not to pretend this does not happen. It is to bring compassion to the places where it does. It is to say, "I understand why this part of me is afraid." And then perhaps, But we are here now. Here, in this room, in this breath, in this night. Not back there, not entirely, not forever. This is one of the slowest forms of healing, the gentle separation of past from present, the moment when the wound speaks and we do not have to obey instantly, the moment when fear rises and we can listen without surrendering the whole sky to it, the moment when old pain says, close, and something quieter in us says, perhaps not all the way. Not all the way. That may be enough at first. Healing does not always ask us to become wide open. Sometimes it asks only that we do not close completely, that we leave a crack in the door, a little space for new evidence, a little room for a different kind of ending, a little mercy towards the self that is still learning the difference between danger and memory. When pain rules us, it often makes the world very small. It narrows the path. It tells us to avoid, to control, to predict, to prepare for the worst, to stay one step ahead of disappointment, to keep our hands near the exits. And sometimes, after what we have lived through, this narrowing is understandable. But the soul was not made to live forever in a locked room. It needs air. It needs light. It needs the possibility of trust, even if trust begins very small. It needs moments where the body learns that peace is not a trick, that gentleness is not always followed by harm, that rest does not have to be earned by constant vigilance, that the future is not required to repeat the past. This is not easy to believe when pain has been loud, so we do not force belief. We practice noticing, quietly. Perhaps today was not the whole story. Perhaps this person is not that person. Perhaps this moment is not that moment. Perhaps my body is remembering something old, and I can thank it for trying to protect me. Perhaps I can stay with myself until the wave passes. Perhaps I do not have to decide the meaning of my whole life from inside one frightened feeling. There is such gentleness in the word perhaps. It does not demand certainty. It does not argue with the wound. It simply opens a window. Perhaps. Perhaps there is more than this pain. Perhaps there is more than this fear. Perhaps there is more than the story the wound learned to tell. Being ruled by pain often means that the wound becomes an identity. Not consciously, perhaps, not deliberately, but slowly the wound begins to answer for us. Who am I? The one who was hurt. What is life? The place where hurt happens. What is love? A risk. What is trust? A mistake. What is rest? Unsafe. What is hope? Naive. And these answers may feel protective, but they are also heavy. They leave so little space for the rest of the self, because you are not only the one who was hurt. You are also the one who endured, the one who noticed beauty, even briefly, the one who made it through days you did not know how to make it through, the one who may have laughed again, even if softly, the one who still knows how to care, the one who still has preferences, memories, humour, curiosity, warmth, tiredness, longing, and quiet courage. The wound may be part of the story, but it is not the whole book, and it is not a betrayal of the wound to remember the rest of yourself. Sometimes we fear that if we stop organising life around pain, we will be dishonouring what happened, as if healing means saying it did not matter, as if becoming lighter means excusing what was heavy, as if resting means forgetting. But healing does not require us to deny the wound. It only asks that the wound no longer be forced to define everything.
We can honor what happened and still let new life enter. We can remember and still breathe. We can carry the scar and still reach for warmth. We can say, "This changed me," without saying, "This owns me." That is an important sentence. This changed me, but it does not own me, even if some days it feels close, even if some nights the old ache speaks loudly, even if healing has not been clean or simple or complete. Still, somewhere within you, there may be a quiet place that knows the difference, a place that says, "I am more than what I carry." Not in a loud way, not in a forced way, just as a small truth, a seed truth, something that can be held gently until it grows. The wounded healer learns this not only for themselves, but also in how they meet others. They learn not to reduce people to their pain. They do not see only the diagnosis, the grief, the anxiety, the history, the loss, the wound. They see the person, the whole person, or at least they try. They know how painful it can be to be treated as only the worst thing that happened, or only the fragile one, only the difficult one, only the damaged one, only the person who needs care. True compassion does not trap someone inside their wound. It honors the wound without making it the whole identity. It says, "I see that you are hurting, and also, I see that you are more than your hurt." Both are needed. If we ignore the pain, the person feels unseen. If we see only the pain, the person feels reduced. Gentle healing makes room for both. Yes, this hurts. Yes, this matters. And yes, there is more here too. There is still life, still breath, still possibility. Still a self beyond the wound, even if that self feels quiet right now. Perhaps this is one reason pain must be met with such care. If ignored, it may grow louder. If worshipped, it may become a ruler. If shamed, it may hide and harden. If held gently, it may begin to take its rightful place. Not erased, not enthroned. Held, carried, integrated, allowed to be part of the story without being given the whole pen. There is a peacefulness in that word, integrated. It means nothing has to be cut away with violence. Nothing has to be denied. Nothing has to be made into an enemy. The wound can be included in the self, but not allowed to imprison the self. It can be remembered, but not constantly obeyed. It can be respected, but not permitted to speak as the only authority. And this takes practice, soft practice. The practice of noticing when old pain is driving the moment. The practice of pausing before reacting. The practice of saying, "This feels familiar, but is it the same?" The practice of letting support in little by little. The practice of allowing joy without suspicion. That last one can be surprisingly tender. Allowing joy. Because when pain has ruled for a long time, joy may feel unsafe. Peace may feel unfamiliar. Kindness may feel like something that could disappear. The body may not trust good things immediately. And so even joy may need to be approached gently, not grabbed, not forced, just allowed in small amounts. A warm drink, a quiet morning, a kind word, a song remembered, a soft blanket, a tree moving in the wind, a moment when the breath comes easier. These are not cures. They are invitations, small reminders that life contains more than the wound, not instead of the wound, alongside it. Life can hold sorrow and warmth, memory and newness, scar and softness, pain and peace. The heart is larger than one feeling, even a strong feeling, even an old feeling, even a feeling that once filled the whole sky. And perhaps tonight, you do not need to change your pain. You do not need to defeat it. You do not need to declare yourself free from it. You do not need to know whether you are carrying it well. You can simply notice that there is a difference between having pain and being pain, between carrying a wound and becoming only the wound, between listening to fear and letting fear rule the whole house. This noticing is gentle. It can happen without pressure. It can happen in the quiet, a soft, inward recognition. There is pain here, and there is also breath. There is memory here, and there is also this room. There is tenderness here, and there is also rest. There is a wound here, and there is also me, still here, still more, still becoming. The night does not ask you to solve the wound. It does not ask you to force yourself into freedom. It does not ask you to be untouched by what once touched you. It simply offers a little space, a place where the pain does not have to be fought, a place where the pain does not have to be obeyed, a place where it can rest beside you, quieter than before, no longer driving every thought. And if it cannot rest yet, that is all right too. You can rest near it. You can soften around it. You can say, I know you're here, and then, gently, but you are not all that is here. This is how the wound begins to lose its throne, not through violence, not through denial, but through the return of the rest of the self that breathes, the self that notices, the self that can be kind, the self that may one day trust again, the self that does not need to be perfectly healed to be whole enough for this moment. So let this thought settle slowly. You may carry pain, many people do, but carrying pain does not mean pain must carry you. It does not mean it must choose every path. It does not mean it must name every room. It does not mean it must speak louder than every other part of your life. There can be space around it. There can be tenderness beside it. There can be quiet beyond it. And for tonight, that is enough. Enough to breathe. Enough to soften. Enough to remember that the wound may be real, but it is not the whole of you. You are wider than pain, deeper than fear, more spacious than memory. And even now, gently, slowly, without needing to force anything, some part of you may be learning how to carry what hurt without being ruled by it. Some part of you may be remembering that life is still here, the room is still here, the breath is still here, the night is still here, and you are still here too, not only wounded, not only healing, simply human. And quietly, for now, that is enough. Chapter 9. Letting the wound become wisdom. Wisdom does not always arrive looking like wisdom. Sometimes it arrives as a question we can no longer avoid. Sometimes it arrives as a quiet ache. Sometimes it arrives after the old ways of understanding ourselves have stopped working. Sometimes it arrives through the very place we once wished would disappear. The wound, the tender place, the part of us that still remembers, the part of us that has carried something difficult for longer than anyone else may know. And yet, slowly, in time, with enough gentleness, something can begin to change. The wound does not vanish. It does not suddenly become beautiful. It does not turn into wisdom because we force it to. But it may begin to soften. It may begin to speak differently. It may become less like a locked room and more like a quiet teacher. Not a teacher we asked for, not a teacher we would have chosen, but a teacher, perhaps, all the same. There is no need to rush this.
There is no need to make meaning before meaning is ready. There is no need to say, "This made me stronger," if all you know tonight is that it made you tired. There is no need to call the wound a gift. Some wounds are not gifts. Some wounds are simply wounds. And it is important to be honest about that. Wisdom does not require us to pretend that pain was fair. It does not require us to decorate what hurt. It does not require us to feel grateful for what broke something open inside us. Wisdom may begin with a simpler truth. This happened. This mattered. This changed me. And I am still here, still breathing, still learning how to live with tenderness, still discovering that the wound does not have to be the end of the story. Letting the wound become wisdom is not the same as turning pain into a performance. It is quieter than that. It is slower. It is more private. It may happen in the small moments no one sees. The moment you respond differently than you once would have. The moment you pause before judging someone. The moment you notice your old fear rising and choose not to let it speak for your whole life. The moment you are gentle with a part of yourself you used to criticize. The moment you realize that healing does not mean never hurting again. It may mean knowing how to hold the hurt without becoming lost inside it. Wisdom is often less dramatic than we imagine. It may not feel like certainty. It may not feel like having all the answers. In fact, real wisdom may make us less certain in some ways. Less certain that we know the whole story. Less certain that other people's lives are simple. Less certain that pain should follow a tidy timetable. Less certain that strength always looks strong. The wound, when met with honesty, can teach us humility. It can remind us that we are not above the ordinary fragility of being human, that we too can be frightened, we too can be disappointed, we too can be changed by love, by loss, by failure, by grief, by longing, by the quiet weight of things left unsaid. And when we know this about ourselves, not as an idea, but as lived truth, something in us becomes less harsh, less sharp, less quick to stand above others. We no longer need to look down on another person's struggle in order to feel safe from our own. We no longer need to divide the world into those who cope and those who do not. We understand that everyone has thresholds. Everyone has unseen histories. Everyone has places where the heart can be touched. This is not weakness. It is reality. And when we can meet reality without turning away, wisdom has already begun. The wound becomes wisdom slowly, through attention, through patience, through the willingness to feel without drowning, through the courage to remember without being ruled, through the soft discipline of returning to ourselves again and again. It is not a straight road. Some days the wound feels quiet. Some days it speaks loudly. Some days we feel spacious and forgiving. Some days we feel small and tired. This does not mean we are failing. It only means we are human. The path from wound to wisdom is not a smooth line rising upward. It is more like the tide, coming in, going out, returning, revealing, covering, revealing again. And all the while, something beneath the surface may be slowly changing. The wound may begin to lose some of its terror, not because it was nothing, not because we have forgotten, but because we have learned that we can meet it and remain. We can feel the memory and still breathe. We can touch the tender place and not disappear. We can say, "Yes, this is part of me," without saying, "This is all of me." There is deep wisdom in being able to stay with ourselves, to stay with truth,
to stay with another person's pain without needing to run into advice or explanation. The wounded healer learns in time that not every wound needs a speech.
Not every sorrow needs a lesson. Not every difficult thing needs to be transformed into something impressive. Sometimes wisdom is the ability to stop making pain perform, to let it be quiet, to let it be real, to let it sit in the room without demanding that it justify its presence. And then, slowly, perhaps, to ask what it has taught us. Not what it was supposed to teach, not what others think it should have taught, but what it has actually taught. Maybe it has taught you to listen more carefully. Maybe it has taught you that people can look fine and still be hurting. Maybe it has taught you not to laugh at someone else's sensitivity. Maybe it has taught you that rest is not laziness. Maybe it has taught you that the body remembers what the mind tries to outrun. Maybe it has taught you that kindness matters most when life feels least tidy. Maybe it has taught you that love cannot always fix, but it can accompany. Maybe it has taught you that being human is less about being invulnerable and more about remaining open without abandoning yourself. These are quiet teachings. They do not shout. They do not make us superior. They do not give us permission to lecture others. They simply deepen us. They make the inner life wider. They help us recognize the hidden rooms in other people. And perhaps most importantly, they help us recognize the hidden rooms in ourselves. Because wisdom is not only what we offer outward, it is also how we live inward. The way we speak to ourselves when old pain returns. The way we respond to our own tiredness. The way we hold the younger parts of us that did not know what to do. The way we stop punishing ourselves for needing time. The way we allow the wound to be included without allowing it to be king. This is a tender balance. To honor the wound without worshipping it. To learn from pain without glorifying it. To remember what happened without letting it close every door. To let the past be part of the story without handing it the whole future. Wisdom may be the gentle art of giving everything its rightful place. The wound has a place, but so does joy. The grief has a place, but so does laughter. The fear has a place, but so does trust, even if it begins very small. The scar has a place, but so does the skin around it, still living, still feeling, still capable of warmth. Nothing true needs to be erased, but nothing painful needs to rule forever. This is how the wound becomes wisdom, not by being denied, not by being obeyed, but by being held within a larger self, a self that can say, I have known pain, and I am still more than pain. A self that can say, I have been changed, and I am still becoming. A self that can say, I do not need to be untouched to be whole. There is a quiet freedom in that, the freedom of no longer waiting to become perfect before living. No longer waiting to become fully healed before offering kindness. No longer waiting to become fearless before taking one gentle step. No longer waiting to become wise enough before resting. You are allowed to be unfinished. You are allowed to be in process. You are allowed to carry tenderness and still be trusted with peace. The wound becomes wisdom when we stop using it as proof that we are less worthy, less lovable, less capable, less whole, and begin to understand slowly that the wound may have opened us to the deep humanity we share with others, not above them, not below them, with them, beside them, among them. One human being carrying a story, meeting another human being carrying a story. This is where compassion becomes very simple,
No hierarchy, no performance, no need to be the enlightened one. Just recognition. I know something of pain. You know something of pain. May we be gentle with each other. May we be gentle with ourselves. There is no need to make this grand. The deepest wisdom often feels ordinary. It may look like answering yourself kindly. It may look like sleeping instead of proving. It may look like saying no without cruelty. It may look like saying yes without fear. It may look like letting someone help you. It may look like not turning away from someone else's tears. It may look like making space for your own. Sometimes wisdom looks like a quiet evening, a softened face, a less defended breath. The simple realization that the old wound is present, but not in command. And tonight, perhaps that is enough. To let the wound be present without becoming the whole room. To let whatever has hurt you rest within a larger kindness. To stop asking it to explain everything. To stop asking yourself to transform it perfectly. Perhaps wisdom is not something we reach. Perhaps it is something that gathers slowly, like dusk, a little at a time. In the spaces where we stop lying to ourselves. In the moments when we become less cruel. In the breath between reaction and response. In the silence where we finally allow something true to be true. The wound becomes wisdom when it teaches us to be more human, not less, more patient, more aware, more humble, more willing to listen, more careful with the unseen burdens of others, more honest about our own. And still, even then, we are allowed to rest. We do not have to turn every wound into service. We do not have to turn every lesson into responsibility. We do not have to become the healer in every room. The wisdom that grows from pain must also include the wisdom to lay down. To know when the heart is tired. To know when the body needs quiet. To know when compassion must turn inward and become shelter for the self. Perhaps this is one of the final teachings of the wound. That we are not endless. That we are not machines. That we cannot live forever in effort. That rest is not a reward for becoming whole. Rest is part of becoming whole. So tonight, let wisdom be simple. Not a great revelation, not a shining conclusion, just a soft knowing. You have been affected by life. You have carried things. You have learned in ways you may not yet fully understand. And still, you do not have to explain it all. You do not have to make it beautiful. You do not have to prove that the pain was worth something. You can simply allow the possibility that, in time and with care, what has hurt may also deepen your tenderness. Not because it had to happen, not because it was fair, but because your heart, somehow, kept living, kept listening, kept searching for a way not to close completely. That is quiet wisdom, the wisdom of the still open heart, the wisdom of the person who has known darkness and does not wish to become darkness, the wisdom of the one who can say, I will not let what hurt me take all of me. So let that thought rest beside you. You do not have to force the wound to become wisdom. You only have to stop abandoning yourself around it. You only have to meet it gently when you can. You only have to allow your life to be wider than the pain. And perhaps, slowly, without needing to announce itself, wisdom will gather there. In the softened places, in the patient places, in the places where you once thought there was only hurt. A small light, a quiet understanding, a tenderness that does not need to explain itself. And for tonight, that is enough. Enough to breathe. enough to loosen your hold on the day, enough to let the old wound rest without asking it to teach you anything more before morning. You are allowed to be changed. You are allowed to be healing. You are allowed to be unfinished. And still, even now, gently, quietly, you are allowed to be at peace. Chapter 10. Resting in the knowledge that you are not alone. There is a quiet comfort in knowing that you are not alone, not because someone else can live your life for you, not because another person can reach inside the wound and lift it away, not because every sorrow can be explained, or every ache can be answered, or every difficult season can be made simple, but because loneliness makes pain heavier, and even a little companionship, even a little recognition, even a little warmth can change the atmosphere around what we carry. Sometimes the heart does not need certainty. Sometimes it does not need instruction. Sometimes it does not even need to understand itself completely. Sometimes it only needs to feel that it has not been abandoned, that someone is near, that something kind remains, that the tender place within us is not a place of exile. There is a deep human need to be met in the places where we feel most unsure. Not corrected, not judged, not hurried. Met, quietly, gently, with enough patience that the guarded parts of us begin to believe they are safe. And perhaps this is why the wounded healer matters, not as a grand idea, not as a theory to be held at a distance, but as a quiet reminder that the places where we have hurt may also be the places where we learn how not to leave each other alone. The wound, when it is met with honesty, may teach us the language of companionship. It may teach us how to sit beside silence, how to listen without rushing, how to notice the trembling beneath the surface, how to say, without needing many words, "I know something of this. You do not have to be alone here." And sometimes that is enough. Not enough to erase the pain, not enough to resolve the whole story, but enough to make the room feel less cold, enough to let the breath soften, enough to remind the heart that being wounded is not the same as being beyond reach. You are not beyond reach. Even if there have been times when you felt far away from yourself, even if there have been seasons when no one seemed to understand, even if your pain had no clear language, even if you carried it quietly, privately, behind the ordinary shape of your days, you were still here, still human, still worthy of tenderness, still part of the wide, shared story of people trying to live with what life has given them. There is no need to make this dramatic. There is no need to make it perfect. It can be very simple. A person sits in the dark and wonders if anyone else has ever felt this way. And somewhere, countless others have sat in their own dark and wondered the same thing. Different rooms, different lives, different stories, but the same human ache. The ache to be understood. The ache to be held in kindness, the ache to stop pretending, even for a little while, the ache to know that our most tender places do not make us unlovable, and they do not. Your tenderness does not make you unlovable. Your wound does not make you unworthy. Your tiredness does not make you a failure. Your unfinished healing does not remove you from the circle of human belonging. You do not have to arrive whole before you are allowed to rest. You do not have to become wise before you are allowed to be comforted. You do not have to turn every difficult thing into a lesson before the night will hold you. You can simply be here, breathing, listening, letting the day loosen its grip, letting the body remember that it does not have to carry the whole story at once. There may be wounds you still do not fully understand, old moments that shaped you, old absences that stayed with you, old fears that return when life becomes uncertain, old griefs that move quietly through the rooms of memory. You do not have to solve them tonight. You do not have to explain them. You do not have to defend their importance. You can let them be known softly. Yes, this is here. Yes, this mattered. Yes, this has been part of me. And then, just as softly, you can remember. This is not all of me. The wound is here, but so is the breath. The pain is here, but so is the body resting. The memory is here, but so is the present moment. The scar is here, but so is the life around it. You are more spacious than any single sorrow, wider than any one story, more than the parts of you that learned to be afraid. And even if you cannot fully feel that tonight, you can let the thought rest nearby, like a small light in another room, not demanding belief, not forcing hope, just glowing quietly, waiting. There is no need to rush toward healing. Healing that is hurried often becomes another kind of pressure, another standard to meet, another way to feel behind. But true healing has a slower rhythm. It often moves like sleep arriving, not because we command it, not because we chase it, but because the conditions become gentle enough. The room quiets, the body softens, the mind stops gripping, the heart feels less watched, and slowly something in us begins to unclench. Perhaps healing is not always something we do. Perhaps sometimes healing is what becomes possible when we stop fighting ourselves, when we stop shaming the wound, when we stop demanding that tenderness disappear, when we stop treating our humanity as a problem to be managed. There is nothing wrong with being affected by life. There is nothing wrong with having places inside you that still need care. There is nothing wrong with needing time. The tree does not apologize for growing slowly. The tide does not apologize for returning again and again. The moon does not apologize for moving through phases. And you do not have to apologize for healing in a human way. Slowly, unevenly, quietly. Sometimes with courage, sometimes with tears, sometimes with long pauses where nothing seems to be changing, even though beneath the surface, something is learning how to breathe again. You are not alone in this. Somewhere, in ways you may never see, other people are carrying their own hidden tenderness. The person who smiled today may have been carrying grief. The person who seemed confident may have been carrying fear. The person who listened kindly may have learnt kindness through pain. The person who looked composed may have been holding themselves together with more effort than anyone knew. Human beings are deep, so much deeper than the surface, and when we remember this, the world becomes softer. Not easier, exactly, but softer. We begin to understand that everyone we meet is more than the moment we see, more than the sentence they speak, more than the role they play, more than the armour they wear. And we are more than ours, too. You are more than the armour you learned to wear, more than the face that says, "I'm fine," more than the strength that keeps going, more than the wound that opened something in you. There is a self beneath all of it, a quiet self, a living self, a self that does not need to prove its worth by being untouched, a self that can be tired and still worthy, unsure and still held, tender and still whole enough for this moment, and perhaps tonight that is all that is needed. Not a complete transformation, not a perfect peace, just enough softness to rest, enough permission to stop performing, enough kindness to let the wound be quiet for a while. You do not have to keep watch over everything tonight. You do not have to guard every door. You do not have to rehearse every conversation. You do not have to revisit every old ache. You do not have to decide what everything means. The night is wide enough to hold what remains unfinished. Let the unfinished things be unfinished. Let the unanswered questions be unanswered. Let the tender places be tender. Let the healer in you rest. Let the helper rest. Let the one who notices everything rest. Let the one who has been trying to make sense of the pain rest.
There is nothing more you need to become before you are allowed to sleep. You do not need to become stronger tonight. You do not need to become wiser tonight. You do not need to forgive, understand, overcome, explain, or resolve. You can simply let yourself be, as you are, in this moment, with this breath, with this tiredness, with this quiet. And if the wound is still there, it can rest too. It does not need to speak loudly. It does not need to justify itself. It does not need to become wisdom before morning. It can simply be held in the larger gentleness of the night. A gentleness that asks very little. A gentleness that does not hurry. A gentleness that says, "You are safe enough now to soften." Perhaps not completely, perhaps not all at once, just a little. A loosening of the jaw, a softening around the eyes, a slower breath. A little more weight given back to the bed beneath you. A little less need to hold yourself together. You are allowed to be held by the night, by rest, by the quiet knowledge that others have walked through their own dark rooms and found in time that dawn still comes. Not always quickly, not always in the way expected, but softly, gradually, with a pale light at the edge of things, and maybe that is enough hope for now. Not a bright hope, not a demanding hope, a quiet hope, the kind that does not ask you to rise immediately, the kind that simply remains nearby while you rest, the kind that says, there is more life yet, more kindness, more breath, more ordinary mornings, more small moments of peace, more chances to meet yourself gently, more chances to discover that the wound did not take everything. The wound may have changed you, but it did not remove your capacity for tenderness. It did not erase your belonging. It did not close every doorway. Somewhere within you, there is still a place that can receive softness. Somewhere within you, there is still a place that recognizes kindness. Somewhere within you, there is still a quiet life moving toward rest. Let it move slowly. Let it take its time. Let it not have to explain itself. The wounded healer in the end is not a person who has transcended pain, not a person who has become untouched, not a person who has mastered the heart and made it obedient. The wounded healer is simply someone who has learned, or is learning, that pain does not have to become cruelty, that tenderness does not have to become shame, that the wound, met gently, may one day become a doorway into patience, a doorway into humility, a doorway into a deeper kind of kindness. And perhaps the first person you are allowed to offer that kindness to is yourself. Not after you have earned it, not after you have understood everything, not after you have become calm enough, healed enough, wise enough, useful enough. Now, here, as you are, you can offer yourself one quiet mercy. You can stop fighting the fact that you are human. You can let the breath come and go. You can let the old story loosen.
You can let the night draw a soft curtain around the day. Nothing more is needed. Nothing more is required. And for tonight, that is enough. You do not have to fix the wound. You do not have to explain the wound. You do not have to become wise before morning. You do not have to carry every ache into the center of your attention. You can let some things rest at the edge. You can let some things wait. You can let yourself drift towards sleep without completing the work of healing. Because healing does not only happen when we are working. Sometimes it happens when we are quiet. Sometimes it happens when we stop striving. Sometimes it happens in the soft dark, when the body is allowed to lay down its burdens and the mind no longer has to keep naming them. So rest now, if rest will come. And if sleep does not arrive immediately, there is still no failure. There is only this moment, this breath, this gentle returning. You are not alone in being wounded. You are not alone in being unfinished. You are not alone in longing for peace. And even the tenderest places within you may one day become doorways into kindness. For now, they do not have to become anything. They can simply be held, softly, quietly, with no need to prove, no need to perform, no need to hurry. Just the breath, just the night, just the quiet knowledge that you are human, and that being human is enough. For tonight, for this breath, for this soft and gentle moment, it is enough. As this reflection comes gently to an end, let this thought remain with you. You do not have to be untouched to be whole. You do not have to be fully healed to be worthy of peace. And you do not have to turn every wound into wisdom before you are allowed to rest. For tonight, it is enough to have listened, enough to have softened even a little, enough to remember that the tender places within you are not failures. They are part of your humanity. May you carry yourself gently from here. May you be patient with what is still healing, and may you remember that even the quietest kindness can become a doorway back to yourself. Thank you for listening. Thank you for spending this time with Quietly Reflective. Take care of yourself. Be gentle with your heart. And for now, let the night hold what you no longer need to carry alone.